much. Okay. So, okay. Obviously, you guys know budget meetings. Jeff and the financial board have been working on budgets for the last week and a half, as most of you have been there for deliberations. They've been dealing with, what, about 150 budgets? Yeah. So, the goal is to get through all of them as fast as possible, because we don't want to stay here till like 3 in the morning. So, just some kind of basic things. Try to maintain quiet and respect, just basic decorum. I mean, we're usually pretty open about like letting side conversations go as long as they're not bothering anyone. We're trying to be a little bit stricter next week because we need everyone to focus and everyone needs to pay attention. So, you know, again, make sure you're on point and you're paying attention. Only speak when I or Jeff recognize you next week. Will you be allowed to speak to the public? So that way, like when, let's say Woody would say something. No, Woody would say something. And then like someone has someone that let's say Taylor has someone that can directly respond to that. Taylor has to raise his hand. Like usually we just let like Taylor would say something. We are to enforce one speaker at a time.
I would just like to say that's inclusive of anyone in the gallery. So don't just be like looking all over the place. If people start screaming out from the gallery, just don't pay attention to them unless they've specifically been called on by us.
Yeah. Okay. So this is. Oh, sorry, you.
No, I'm just getting my talking out now before next week, right?
Okay, so we did the order is the same for all of these. This is the way. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with operation budgets, and then technical questions, point of parliamentary inquiry are going to go first, and those are kind of debates on like Sean might have a question for Jeff, which would be like, hey Jeff, why did the finance board not fund this item on this budget, or why did they fund this item? And that's what point of inquiries are. Another point of inquiry that probably will come up is, what is this item used for? Like, why do they need that? And Jeff or someone on the finance board will try to insight to the best of their knowledge. Otherwise, there's a possibility we can toss that up to the actual group if they are here. But yeah, keep your point of inquiries, your technical questions separate from your actual pro cons. So if you're, for example, if you're like, I don't feel this organization should get this thing, that's not a point of inquiry, that's not something to bring up during the point of inquiry times. It's something to bring up during the pro con debate. Does that make sense to everyone? Alright, so now we're gonna package the bills. Now, if you feel that one bill does not deserve funding, or when we get to later ones does deserve to be funded, you can when we motion to package the bills, you can say motion to package the bills with the exception of ... For example, a motion to package bills with the exception of, I don't know, what's the student organization?
You do it by bill number. So 55, 100.
Well, I'm sorry, it's not specific operation.
Well, whatever bill number it is, just call it.
Okay, so now we're going to do programming board, that's explicitly UU, and then we're going to go fully funded, partially funded, and then non-funded. And again, it's going to follow the same order: pro con times 3, discussion board, and any excluded bills. And then after we finish voting, we're going to toss it to the group to see if they have anything to say about the topic, and that's going to be explicit time for them to speak.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Is there an opportunity for pro-con debate to be in the past?
Yes.
I'd just like to make a request. I'm going to try to have the minutes out hopefully by Friday. It's a little idealistic right now, but that's kind of what I'm shooting for. So if you could read them in advance, as opposed to asking me like a technical question on one of the 150 budgets that I've read in the past 2 weeks in advance, so I could give you a better answer to your question, as opposed to just trying to really remember it off the top of my head, which when you have 150 budgets is sometimes hard to do. Usually I'm pretty good about it, but I can't always get everything. So if you see it in advance and you want to ask me technical questions, you want to pull it out, that's fine. I don't need you to tell me you want to pull something out in advance. But if you just have like a small question, like what's the venue for this, if you could try to ask that in advance, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Keep the questions relevant too, because that's when we go running really long, when we have irrelevant questions that have no real bearing on whether or not it should be fun.
Yeah. Anything else for the stuff? Okay, so these are, again, kind of mentioned earlier, these are reasons not to be excluded. Why is this funded, not funded? Like, again, I don't feel this program should be funded for this reason. Parliamentary procedures inquiries and technical questions are not reasons to exclude a bill. And then fundamentally disagreement with finance board recommendations. So like, let's say you don't feel something should be funded, or you feel that it should be funded, and you can motion a vote on that bill after we bundle it with a recommendation to the finance board to either fund it or not fund it, depending on how it is. So for example, let's say I go to an organization that, I don't know, Bonnie thinks should get fully funded and I didn't get any funding whatsoever. Bonnie can say, I would like to motion this bill with a recommendation that it goes back to the finance board with it getting full, as much funding as possible, or then looking through it again. Something to that effect. Again, the finance board does not need to follow what we recommend, but it's something we can do parliamentary wise. Again, mentioned earlier, Jeff will try to answer any question that you have. If you can't, just toss it to the gallery. Is there a question, Gary? Okay, and then this is the other thing. Any group that doesn't receive funding, we will be stressing this at the meeting itself, will be eligible for appeals, which is next week, so 2 weeks from today then. And then this is a lot of better situations for places that didn't get funding, so on the not funded at all or partially funded. Like for example, if they didn't get funding because they didn't have venue confirmation or they didn't have artist confirmation, and they get that the next week, they can then apply for appeals immediately. And I mean, that's up to Jeff's discretion on how he wants to, if he wants to give them higher priority because they submitted bills earlier, but it's up to him. But that's something that you want to look at and think about as you're voting on these bills. Yes?
Wait, question. Why is that appeals process so early after those are?
Because it's appeals based on what?
Well, no, I mean, why wouldn't we give them more time to, like, maybe 2 weeks or?
Because it's not really in our hands. It's really up to SCPS because all venues have to be approved by